What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, entrepreneurship, and professional wrestling to help you harness your own inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is someone that I am truly honored to have on, an undisputable legend in the world of pro wrestling, heavy metal, film, television, podcasting, and the quintessential entertainer, Chris Jericho. And I got to keep this introduction short because I'm too excited to dive into our conversation, but there's a lifetime of entertainment to get into. So let's unpack this. Chris Jericho, welcome to the podcast.
Excellent. How are you, man?
Good. Awesome. I am thrilled to have you. I mean, I'm an old school wrestling fan. I'm a new school wrestling fan. So this is a big one to me. In addition to that, deep into the Web3 space, which we're going to get to with your Painmaker project. So we have a lot to unpack. But the first thing I like to do on this show is really dig into the origin of my guest. Where did the creativity come from? Where did the drive come from? And I want to talk about your dad a little bit, and your dad, professional NHL hockey player. How did his career influence you to follow your dreams when you were a kid?
Well, I think you pretty much just answered your own question there. The fact that I kind of grew up in a house where my dad played pro hockey and kind of, I think at 17 years old, was basically scooped out of his high school class to go to play for the Boston Bruins, kind of paved the way for when I wanted to, become a wrestler and a musician and all these things. Even though it sounded pretty far-fetched to the average bear, I think my dad understood it because he had kind of been through that before with his life. So it was always kind of a, especially like in 1990 when you talk about wanting to be a pro wrestler, it's not like it is now. It's almost like telling your parents you want to become a sword swallower in the circus or something. In right. That, how do you even do that, right? Like that sounds impossible. How do you become a wrestler? There was no internet or any kind of website you could go to.
Saturday, Sunday.
But my dad was
Saturday
always
night.
kind of like, let's just make it happen. Let's figure it out. So there was always a real kind of a positive element to some of these wacky ideas that I had because he had done the same thing.
Well, it's interesting, being a professional athlete like your father. How did he teach you early on about failure? I mean, the way the story goes, correct me if I'm wrong, you got cut from the hockey team in 12th grade. Like, was that like the first real taste of serious, athletic failure? I mean, how did you synthesize that and learn to move forward?
It was actually the 12th grade when I got cut from the high school hockey team, but I didn't really want to do it anyways. I was too busy playing with my band and I was too busy working out and thinking about wrestling and thinking about rock and roll. So I played hockey because that's just what you do growing up in Winnipeg, especially as the son of Ted Irvin. But I was never great at hockey. We used to have 4 tiers that you would play like in the community club, and tier 4 was the worst and tier 1 was the best. And I was tier 3. It was like average, but I had fun with it. It was cool.
You enjoyed it.
Hockey was never something that I really wanted to do. So I never really saw that as failure. I just saw it as like one less thing that I had to worry about, so I could go lift weights after school and then go to band practice. Go play with my band.
Well, I'm sure hockey taught you how to take a hit and toughen you up. I mean, that's just in the Canadian DNA, right?
Well, yeah, I know growing up in Winnipeg where it's minus 30 and you're kind of walking the streets on a Saturday night because there's nothing really to do when you're a kid. So you steal a bottle of booze from somebody's parents' liquor cabinet and just go walk around. Like there's your activity for a Saturday night. So I think it does kind of toughen you up, mentally and physically as well.
One of the themes throughout your career journey has been going all in. You go all in, full blast with everything. When was that moment when you decided to go all in wrestling?
Probably, I don't know. Probably when I was about 16 or so, I think, maybe. I just really was enamored with wrestling. I had been since probably I was 8 or 9 years old. And I was, like I said, that was probably when I decided I wanted to be a wrestler and I wanted to be in a band. And those are the kind of the 2 things that I wanted to do. And there was, an address that would show up on the local wrestling show from Calgary, that you could go to the Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp. And I wrote that address down. I think I wrote a letter to the address probably around that time frame when I was 16. And, how do you do this? How old do you have to be? and they said you had to be 18. So that's kind of when I started focusing. Well, when I turn 18, that's what I want to do. So you know, I don't want to give you the whole life story because it'll take 5 hours, but basically that was kind of the plan, was to go into wrestling when I was old enough to do so. And that's kind of when I decided. So there was no backup plan and there was no really other option because there wasn't anything else that I wanted to do. You know, I went and got my journalism degree. You know, and once I got my journalism degree, it's like I would write for the local newspaper, but it's like, I don't want to be the guy, you know, writing about people. I want to be the guy that's being written about. And so that kind of very quickly made me realize like, there's really nothing else that I want to do other than be in wrestling and play my guitar. And that's just it. And then whatever else happens. But these are the two things that I want to do. And wrestling was the one that I could access first because there was an actual school that you could go to learn how to wrestle, and that's kind of where it all started.
Who were some of your early wrestling influences? Who did you look up to?
I was a huge Hulk Hogan fan in the 80s, like, you know, 86, 87, 88. Hulk Hogan was kind of the king of wrestling. So that was probably my biggest influence. And then he was, you know, obviously really big. There's some of the smaller guys were like Randy Savage, and Ricky Steamboat, Owen Hart.
Love Ricky Steamboat.
Those Shawn Michaels. Those are the type of guys that like, okay, I know that Hulk Hogan is 6'8" and 300 pounds with 24-inch pythons. But you know, these guys, I remember I waited in line at World of Wheels, which was like an automobile convention. I waited in line for 3 hours to get Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's picture and his autograph. And I like, what can I ask him? I've got 3 hours to think of a question. And when I got to the front, I asked the question, how tall are you?
Come on.
And he said, I'm 5'11", 225 pounds. And I was like, fuck, I'm 5'11". Now you can visualize it. Like, nice. I'm not 6'8" like the Hulkster, but I'm 5'11" like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. So maybe I could do this. Obviously he's jacked to the gills and like, you know, 30 pounds heavier than I am, but I can gain weight. I can't make myself taller. So that was the first time when I realized like, okay, you know, guys that aren't 6'8" can become great wrestlers. And that was kind of done. That kind of really sealed the deal for me at that point.
And how enamored were you with the storylines? You are a creator, and we'll fast forward in a little bit to how that translates into today's story. But the storylines and how much they resonated and how much influence you have once you get into wrestling school of how you kind of dictate and create your own storylines as a character and then in the ring as well.
Well, I think probably when I first actually got into the business, I realized that like, okay, like once again, I'll never be the biggest guy. And it's storylines. Like when you first start in wrestling, there's really no storylines. You know, it's not until you get to, you know, televised wrestling where you get actual stories, because at that point you're wrestling once a month, you know, twice a month.
Different towns.
You're in a city once a month, you know. So like, okay, we've got Calgary wrestling, or maybe you'd have it every Friday. So like, okay, this week, this guy attacks you, next week you have a match, you know? And so, but to me, it was about the characters and the personalities and the charisma and that sort of stuff, because, you know, I could never be the biggest guy on the show, but I could have the biggest personality, you know, and the biggest character. And so that I figured that out very early on. And that's kind of what I really focused on, was being the most charismatic person on the show, even if I was, you know, not the biggest, because once again, early 90s, it was all about the size. And there was a lot of really big guys that were getting into the business. But, you know, I'll say, like, once again, like they're kind of boring, or maybe they don't understand how to wrestle or how to connect with the crowd and that sort of thing. So I realized that was, and it still is to this day, the most important thing about pro wrestling is connecting with the audience and making them want to be involved into what you're doing, engaging with what you're doing. So that's still the most important thing after all these years.
And I love that foundation, and it translates into the project you're doing with Painmaker, which we'll get to in a little bit. For me, it's so crazy for me. I mean, I grew up, I'm 43 years old, to give you a sense of where I am from my wrestling history. I grew up with like Hulk and Sheik and Andre and all those guys too. But for me, like personality, and it was Ric Flair, man, and still is, man. What's your kind of hot take on Ric Flair and his story and how he puts himself out there?
Well, I mean, once again, like it's about the charisma and the character. And I think there's a lot of guys who kind of fall into that category, but Rick's, was great at that, especially, in his day, he was one of the best. But I never really saw a lot of Ric Flair because, once again, growing up in Canada, we didn't have that wrestling. It was more WWF. So that was always more my side of the coin was what was going on with the WWF guys. And then again, getting into the business, obviously, about Ric Flair, but then that's when Shawn Michaels was really hot too. And so I always kind of was really attracted to what Shawn was doing in the States, and then you go to Japan and there's a lot of guys there that you're interested in. You go to Mexico, and that's because that was my foundation, was working internationally for probably 6 years before I kind of really started breaking into the States. So I kind of, that helped me to develop a different style that a lot of guys had. So, even though it took me kind of 6 years to get to the national stage, which might seem like a long time, and in the big picture, it's really not. But in the meantime, I was still, a national star in Japan and almost like a teen heartthrob in Mexico, like on the cover of the Mexican Teen Beat magazine and that sort of thing. So I really learned how to become a main event top level performer around the world before I ever really came to the States. Mexico, Japan, Germany was really big for me. And then also working kind of all around Canada too. So I kind of had a really healthy palette of experience by the time I got into TV in the States, which I think kind of really helped me because once you learn how to get over, as we say in the business, once you learn how to get over, in Japan, for example, get over in Tokyo, you can take those same principles and get over in Charlotte, North Carolina, or get over in Seattle, Washington. It doesn't really matter where it is. The principle is the same. And that's engaging the audience. That's the most important thing.
And it seems to be a common thread. Was there like one moment, or was there a point where you really felt like a success, or was it just a logical progression in your career? Was there one match, one stage, one city where you're like, shit, I fucking made it. I'm here. I'm at the main event.
It's all relative, right? Like, I can remember being the first main event and, in Winnipeg, Manitoba at a high school gymnasium. And you're like, this is it. I did it. Or the first time wrestling on TV in kind of a cable network in Canada. Like, there you go. You made it. And then suddenly it's all progressive. Then you steal the show in front of 10,000 people at the Sumo Arena in Tokyo, Japan. And that's making it. And then suddenly you're on TV, working for ECW, a very small little company out of Philadelphia, but it was kind of the cool company to be. Now I'm on ECW. Now I've made it. So it continues to go. My biggest goal was to work for WWF. That was the biggest one. And that was in 1999 when I finally signed with them. So that was making it, but then you're just starting your career all over again. So it increasingly becomes, a bigger version of making it. And I think it's all kind of, what do you, like you as in the individual, consider to be really making it? And I think once you're involved in it and expanding your horizons, your definition of making it expands as well. And if you really want it, then you always want more. Even now, I still always want more. Like, I've made it, but there's still other things that I want to do,
Do you still get jitters when you go in the ring? Like, what's kind of that pregame ritual that you got before you step in the ring?
I mean, you don't get jitters where you're terrified, but you should always have some positive, nervous energy because you're still performing, right? And now the stakes are so high because you go into the ring and there's 1 million people watching. If you have 5,000 people in the audience or 10,000 people in the audience and there's 1 million people watching, well, there's that. I mean, if you're playing with the band and there's, you sell out a venue and there, there's 1,000 people in there, there's 500 people in there, whatever it may be. Like,
you need that fire. You need that juice.
You always, I think the day you don't feel like a little nervousness, like in a positive way, is the day you should probably quit. Like, I'll never forget, I wrestled with this guy. He's one of the all-time greats. His name is Gene Kiniski. And I actually was his tag team partner for his very last match. It was probably like in 1992 or something like that. And he was just sitting there with a cigarette. And music's playing. I said, "Oh, this is my music. We got music. Wow, all right." Put the cigarette out and let's go, kid. Like, that's cool that he had that confidence, but there should always be a little bit like, come on, let's go. Let's get ready. This is going to be great. Like that's kind of, I feel that every night, whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think you should feel that because it's healthy for you. You know, it's healthy mentally.
Now, is the moment you don't feel that, Chris, the moment you hang it up? I mean, we talk about, and you spoke about it on Howie Mandel's show too. You know, you had the embolism and you brought yourself back, even better health than now. Like, what's going to be that trigger when you're like, I'm done? Like, is there that moment? Look at Tom Brady, right? Like, Tom Brady retired, quote unquote, came back. And now, I mean, if you guys are watching down there, I mean, some of these games are great and some of them are fucking sad. Like, when do you know when to hang it up from the greatness?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, it's so much different than being in the NFL, right? Because show business, you know, wrestling is show business. Now, obviously, it's an athletic competition, but the beauty for me is like I'll know when it's time to stop wrestling. I still can have the best match on the show on any given night, not every night, but I mean, I think this past Wednesday I probably had the best match on the show. Like, and as long as I feel that I can do that, then I'll stay involved. But I know that it's not going to be 10 more years, you know. But the beauty of it is, like, that's why it's great to be with Fozzy and have the podcast, you know. And now going into NFTs and doing movies and having Talk as Jericho, like, I never have to quit. So when is it time to stop? Like when I fucking die, right? And then maybe then I'll still come back as a ghost or something. At that point in time, maybe I'll have NFT ghosts where you just capture your soul.
Knows? Holograms, man.
Like,
we're close.
So I just saw the Stones in London this past summer, and Mick Jagger's still Mick Jagger. You know,
it's a hologram, man. It's not him. It's a hologram, Chris. It's not really him. I'm telling you.
If you stood up close next to him, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy looks old," but on stage, he's still Mick. So
vampire.
I remember when I was a kid, when my dad was my age, like you're wearing, you know, velour sweatsuits and big giant glasses, and you know, gardening. And now it's like 52, like fuck, I'm still stealing the show on wrestling shows, and my band is bigger than ever, and there's all these other avenues that are going on. So
excited.
I don't ever think about when does it stop. I think of like, what other cool things can I do to keep the plate spinning, you know?
Do you ever think, a complete side note too, and David too, who's joining us too, Dave Shapiro, did you ever think like, I'm 43 years old, what was my dad like at 43? Did he act like me? Did he have the same energy? Do you guys ever think that? Like, complete side note here, like, did my dad have the same energy? Does he?
Well, the world is
philosophy at the University of Kansas, so.
But like the world has changed, right? Like it's like, you know, like when my dad was 52, so then you're looking at, you know, like the 1994 or whatever the hell it was. Like things have changed, like in a positive way. Like think back to when I remember, you know, at 55, you start preparing for retirement.
Used to be old.
What does that even mean? You know, like you got to retire at 55. Like who would ever want to? Whoever wants to retire? Like what are you going to do? Like my dad still works. Like. He's like, why am I going to retire? I remember Ozzy, like years ago, the final Ozzy tour. And after like 6 months, he came back and I was like, oh, like, of course, well, I'm going to take this fucking box and put it over here. And here's a plant. Like who wants, like, no,
sit on the couch.
It doesn't work that way. You know, you need to relax, Chris. Like, no, I don't need to relax. Like, I don't
keep going.
I never liked anybody telling me what to do when I was 18. I certainly don't need you to tell me what to do when I'm 52. And I'm not going to have you tell me what to do when I'm 72. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that's another reason why, like, if you're looking at something like we're talking about in the NFT space, it's a whole new world of cool stuff you can do. And to me, that's kind of what it's all about, is how many cool things can you do to keep people engaged. Once again, that's the word of the day, engaged in what it is that you're doing.
So last question. This is my standing online at the Carl's Ford dealership in the middle of Nebraska, waiting to meet Chris Jericho. And my question is going to be to you, Chris. I'm sure you got this 1 million times. Who was your toughest opponent? Was the toughest match, toughest opponent in the ring?
You know, I mean, like that's such a multifaceted question, because there's tough as in like, who's the strongest style of opponent that you really feel when you're in there?
Well, let me reframe that from a storyline standpoint. In that ring, when you were figuring it out and it was going back and forth, and you guys are just vibing, and it got tough in there, and you wanted to put on the best show. I'm spinning it a little bit, right? who did you jive with the best, and who was that best dance partner?
Best opponent, I had great chemistry with, go through my career with Ultimo Dragon. I had great chemistry with The Rock, with Shawn Michaels, with Kevin Owens was a great dance partner. John Moxley's been awesome. MJF was awesome. So, there's a lot of great, and that goes beyond just being in the ring and wrestling. It's the storyline stuff that you're doing as well. So,
heels, babyface, playing the game.
Yeah, and once again, what kind of a story, what kind of a story can you tell that, people are interested in? So all of those names that I mentioned all had great stories attached to them. So it's not just getting in the ring and having awesome matches, because you can do that with a lot of guys as well. I mean, Kenny Omega and I had one of the greatest matches of all time, but we only wrestled, I think, twice ever, with really no story, So, so it's kind of like I said.
There's a chemistry thing.
There's a chemistry thing. There's also like so many different branches to a question like that. But I think I gave you some pretty great names and some great stories that were attached to it.
And one of the things I love about you, and you kept hitting on it before, is how multifaceted. You're a creator at heart, whether it be music, art, writing, wrestling, and you were a pioneer in the podcast space. I mean, back 2013, I mean, you got like 250 million downloads plus with your show. Early on, where people were saying, this podcast thing, is it going to work out and all that? Like, what'd you say to the naysayers?
I didn't even know what podcasting was. Like, I remember around that time, the first podcast I ever did was Adam Carolla. And I remember I said to my publicist at the time, like, why am I doing a podcast? Because I thought a podcast, literally, I thought it was like a vlog or, a blog, like some dude, you don't want to ever say some guy sitting in the basement, but some guy just like doing it like on a college radio station or something. Like, I didn't even know what it was. Like, what is a podcast? And then I realized, well, it's a long form conversation, and I like that. You know what I mean? I've always been inquisitive that way, and I thought that was kind of a cool idea. So let me start. But once again, when I first started, they're like, well, it's a wrestling podcast. And I was like, well, it can't be, because I'm not just about wrestling. There's so many things. I just did an interview yesterday with Sirius where I had to explain once again, this isn't a wrestling podcast, because if it was, I wouldn't be doing it. I can't just talk about wrestling all the time because I don't fucking care. I'm interested in it to a certain point, but I'm also interested in music and paranormal and comedy and pop culture and freaking, I don't know, give me a mob boss and I'll talk to them. Give me a surfer. What is that?
Just interesting.
Whatever it is that's interesting to me, then I'll talk about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why my show has done so well, is that people never know what they're going to get when Talk is Jericho comes out. There's 2 episodes a week. Who's it going to be? So it keeps people on their toes.
On Kiefer Sutherland. I mean, the guest list is fucking amazing. And the people that you have on too. I mean, talk about Kiefer Sutherland. I mean, acting, music. He's an incredible musician. It's him and his brother, right? On that one.
Well, the thing is with Kiefer is like, I think I played hockey in a celebrity game with him.
And he's a hockey player.
Once. But somehow, like, when you have a popular show that draws numbers, people are offered to you. Would you like to talk to Kiefer Sutherland? Yes, I would. I was in Toronto. He was in Toronto. I went to some producer's building, house, room, and you're sitting down with a guy you've really never met and press record and like have a conversation and make it good. There's an art form to that. And there's over 2 million podcasts now, Adam. And
I know.
The reason why they come and go so fast is because it's not easy to be a podcast host, right?
Preach.
Everyone thinks it's so easy. It's not. And so you get put in a room with someone you've never met before and then have a conversation with them for an hour and make it engaging. If you can do that, that's the secret to podcasting. It's not an interview. It's a conversation.
Dude, for me, it's Howard Stern. That's who I look up to in the space. Chris, I've been doing this 4 years, 250 plus episodes, and I built that muscle, that right. Just like you in all of your creative outputs. And I do it because I love it. And I look at someone like Howard Stern, who turns an interview into a conversation. I mean, he had Hillary Clinton on, and he unpacked the Bill and Hillary Clinton love story. I've never heard how they met, those early days on campus, whatever they were doing. Like, that's interesting. That's like the human piece that you pull out. Those are the threads.
And that's the thing. Like, for me, it was Larry King. Like, I did Larry King's show, I think 5 times maybe. I loved talking to Larry King. He was a great interviewer because he would come in and you're promoting, I don't know, you're promoting Life Water. And he'd be like, all right, what are we talking about? Life Water? Okay. And then like, they didn't give a shit about Life Water. talk about you, whatever it is, then finally incorporate the life water at the end by the time you're into it, right? And you mentioned Slash. I had Slash on before the Guns N' Roses reunion, and he's like, please don't ask me about Guns N' Roses. Like, why would I ask you about Guns N' Roses? I don't care about Guns N' Roses. I'm talking to Slash. He likes dinosaurs. I like dinosaurs. We talked about dinosaurs for half an hour.
Fuck yeah.
We talked about horror movies for half an hour. Then we started talking about the Stones, and then he mentions the time that Guns N' Roses almost broke up when they opened up for the Stones. Now, guess what we're talking about? Guns N' Roses.
Organically.
And then suddenly you talk about, will you ever play again? And this is an hour into the conversation. He's totally throwing stuff around. And it's like, that's how you do it. Not that I ever had an agenda, but when you're talking to somebody and having a conversation, you forget that this thing is here, right here. You forget.
Dude, Larry never prepped either. That was Larry's thing too. He never prepped. Notorious for not prepping.
I don't like prep. Like when we were talking earlier for 10 minutes, no, press record. And whatever you get on tape is what you get, right? I had Meatloaf on. He got lost for 2 hours. By the time he got to the studio, he was fucking pissed. And I was running out of time. I said to the engineer, press record when he gets in.
Just go.
When Meatloaf passed away, I listened back to it. It's hilarious because the first 10 minutes, all we're listening to is an angry Meatloaf pissed off that he was lost.
Gold. It's gold.
Go to this lawyer's office. I'm trying to find the studio. They won't let me use the phone. I don't know what the hell to do. I'm going to drive home. Like, this is great. Where else are you going to hear this in a Meatloaf interview? That's what you want.
So good, man. Let's talk about the topic du jour because that's what we're here for, man. I mean, I'm going contradicting what we said here, dude. So when was like that first? Like, I need to change up the character. I need to come up with this. Like, where did Painmaker, the IRL real life Painmaker character, come from? I see some horror movie inspirations there. I see a little bit of that Pinhead kind of shit going on there. Where did Painmaker come from?
So Painmaker came from I was working in Japan. I did three years in a row headlining the Tokyo Dome, 18, 19, and 20. And the first time I went in 18, it was really great, but I was still kind of doing the WWE character, that I just finished up with. And it didn't quite fit because I've worked in Japan many times. I think I've been there like 63 times or something. And Japan always has a different vibe to wrestling in Japan, especially as a foreigner, especially with what I wanted to do, which if you really want to be a top guy there, you got to be a little bit crazy. And you have to have no rules and just want to beat the shit out of the fans if you could.
Almost reckless.
Yeah, like you're like Bruiser Brody, if you know that. It's more like Godzilla, like, you know, like, and that's not being stereotypical. Like the concept of Godzilla is like this evil creature that just destroys Tokyo by stepping all over it. It's kind of the same concept in wrestling. You just step over everybody. So I was kind of like, I need something that fits a little bit more of my attitude, a little bit more violent, like a little bit more like what would a serial killer look like if he was a pro wrestler? And somebody had made some kind of art of Chris Jericho as the Joker, you know, fan art, right? And just the look of Chris Jericho with this Joker type thing. And I thought, like, what if I did something like that? And the guy, I remember that he had like a hat, like a top hat, like a fedora. What if I had some kind of Joker makeup, but it's not really Joker. It's kind of Alice Cooper-esque, but I didn't want it to be anything like where you do, like, what would a serial killer do if he had makeup? Give him a fucking lipstick thing. He just goes like that.
Yeah. A little bit Joker meets
that. And then maybe like he's putting makeup on, but he like loses interest and it just goes down like that. Right. And then I looked at it. I was like, okay, this is total Alice Cooper. So put some stuff on the side. And that's kind of let me just try that. And then I remember the first time you ever try something different, like you walk out of your dressing room into the, you know, where all the other guys are. And if someone would have said, oh, that looks really stupid, maybe I would have been second guessing, but it's Japan. And of course you're going to wear makeup in Japan. Why wouldn't you? So as soon as I walk in the locker room, the guy that I was working with, he was kind of just like, you know, Japanese guy. And we just start talking about the match. He doesn't even blink about the fact I'm wearing this makeup. No. So there's a guy over there called Okada, who's the top guy, and he's the Rainmaker. And I was going to get ready for a match with him. And I thought, well, fuck, the Painmaker, it practically writes itself. So that's what I did. The first couple times I wore the makeup, it was just Chris Jericho. And then when the Okada match came, it was the Painmaker. And then suddenly that became a thing.
And what about the storyline of the serial killer? Where did that come from? I mean, he had to have some. It just kind of,
I don't know. These things just kind of pop in my head. Okay, what would a serial killer look like if he was a wrestler? There it is. So then when I started kind of thinking more about the Painmaker, we did like a clothing line of the Painmaker, and I introduced the character into AEW. Whenever I have kind of like a death match or some kind of a violent street fight, then the Painmaker comes out like an alter ego of Chris Jericho, right? And then when I started talking with David about NFTs, what can we do? I thought, well, why don't I take the Painmaker out of just wrestling? Because I think I've only played the character maybe half a dozen times, maybe 8.
Right.
I think there's more you could do with it. And that's when I started thinking, what's the backstory of this serial killer? What does he do? You know?
Yeah.
And that's kind
tapped
of where
into
it
your
all,
creative roots, man.
What's
and
that?
Really did you like, you've always been writing, and it started to going back to what you said before, you have longevity here with this character. It really has legs. But question, like NFTs, it's like me trying to explain that shit to my dad. Once you started, like, what was your first taste into the world of digital art and people throwing out words like Web3, digital assets, NFTs?
So I
did you a quick adapter? Did you, like, how did you figure it out in your own journey of what this shit really was?
I did a movie with Kevin Smith called Kilroy Was Here that David and his company produced. And that's when then NFTs started being mentioned. And actually Barry Bloom, my manager who's on right now, he mentioned NFT. And I literally thought, what does that mean? Non-fungible token. And when I heard I literally said, is it some kind of mushroom or like, what is it? Like,
do I got to take this? What's it going to do to me?
That's what it is. It's like a fungi. Like what the fuck does that mean? And then you hear it, like, you don't, like, nobody understands what an NFT is at first. Now we're just starting to get into it, but no one knew what a podcast was at first. Nobody knew what a freaking iPod was or a cell phone. You know, if someone would have, I have a DVD here that some dude sent me. I don't even know why it's sitting here. And I'm like, look, it's DVD.
Do you even have a DVD player? Do people still have DVD players?
Why does this exist? This just was given to me. Like, if someone would have told you, 15 years ago that a DVD would be obsolete and everything would be on your phone, you'd be like, shut up. You're crazy. You're an idiot. There's no way. And that's kind of the same
porn
thing.
Not in a magazine? Porn not in a magazine? Right? You mean I could look at porn right here on my phone? No way.
No way. And that's the same thing with NFTs. What is it? There's no way it's real. And then you realize, oh my gosh, the best example is I have a Wayne Gretzky rookie card somewhere in my house, and I had it for years in a certain place, and now I can't find the fucking thing. And now you see it's selling for $400,000 and $500,000. Not that I'd sell it, but I want it. I have it. I remember getting it in the pack when I was 9 years old. If it was an NFT card, you would never lose it because it's always in the blockchain. And that's what the next version of a Wayne Gretzky rookie card, whoever that will be, in 5-10 years, will be an NFT, and everybody suddenly then will start understanding what it is. So wanting to get in on the ground floor of that with this really cool character idea and storyline idea, it's perfect for Chris Jericho because it's exactly the same thing I did with podcasting, with everything else that I've done.
And I think it ties into your audience too. You talk about engagement, like how do you craft these storylines that continue to engage with your Chris Jericho fan base, who I'm going to assume are Web3 and NFT friendly? Like, what's the process of building out this character and the storylines, and how does that translate into an NFT execution?
Well, not all of them are, but I think once again,
graphic novel too.
I think a lot of people first heard about a podcast through me, and now everyone knows what a podcast is, right? I think that's one of the reasons why Talk is Jericho is still so successful, because if you start with something, you tend to just stick with that, right? And it's the same with NFTs. I think a lot of people understand what it is. A lot of people don't, but they know that Jericho's talking about it. And, in 3 or 4 years when NFT becomes more of the norm, oh yeah, I remember when Jericho was talking about this early on. So, and it's not an NFT just to have an NFT. I don't like that idea either.
It's just to hold something as like a tradable, collectible, but there's something that you're interested in. You actually give a shit about it.
Here's an NFT, and it's a picture of me, and it's got some wispy smoke in it, like whatever. Like let's take it to the next level, which is where the idea for doing actually a whole graphic novel came from. The very first NFT that we did and sold was basically a 20-second clip of the Painmaker who, I think fire shot from his eyes or something, and spikes came up. And then, so that was the first one. Then I kind of why is this happening? And that's kind of where the whole idea of like, well, maybe the Painmaker is a serial killer, but maybe he's an intergalactic serial killer that has reformed himself and is now traveling the galaxy as an assassin for other serial killers. Something like that, right?
And what happens with innocence? Does he occasionally accidentally, or like his deep inside, he's got to kill an innocent?
You got to read the comic.
Yeah, no, he's still a serial killer at heart, and once in a while feels the need to murder an innocent person. So there's the flaw.
So he's got some Dexter tendencies. Yeah,
well, a little bit of a Dexter. It's like if you took Dexter and combined him with kind of Lobo, and combined him with Batman, and combined him with Green Lantern because he flies through space or whatever. That's kind of what it is. So to come up with that concept of a character, and one last thing about it was like, I've seen so many Batman movies and Spider-Man movies and Superman movies, and now they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Ant-Man, are you kidding me? Ant-Man.
They're going to the C-list, man.
Ant-Man was the biggest jobber of superheroes when I was a kid. Nobody wanted to be Ant-Man. So sooner or later, there's going to have to be a new superhero that's created. So I thought, well, let me create this as an NFT. Then let's create it as a graphic novel. And then let's make a movie of it. Oh, you'll never make a movie.
Let's see where it goes.
Wow, that sounds familiar, right? Because what was I told when I was 19? Oh, you'll never be a wrestler. So I don't even listen to that shit.
Listen, you got Dave and Kevin Smith in your corner, man. You got two guys who know what the hell they're doing over there.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? Who says it won't work? And the only way that you'll know if it doesn't work is if you don't try it, So
how's the audience and your fans? What's the feedback? How receptive
once
are they?
Again, what's the feedback is that people either love it or they hate it, and either you're a revolutionary or you're destroying the free world. So, that's the same thing that you get with anything that you do. People either get it or they don't, and I think more and more people are getting it, and they will as time moves on.
And how are you?
It's a very different take on the use of NFT too. This fits into Chris's creativity. It's NFT is a communication tool between creator Chris and the whole interactive storyline going on in the comic. So just like Chris popularized the podcast, I think this project is going to show there's a lot of flexibility in the NFT space that isn't used yet, but this project is.
I mean, we're in the first at bat of the first inning here, folks. I'm a baseball guy, so
right.
I like to use that analogy, and it just opens up the ability for creativity and discovery too, from a technology standpoint. Dave, what are some of the things, and let's give a little bit of alpha here. How is this going to be different as a digital medium than other projects out there?
Well, the whole point is that this is a story that Chris is creating that I think is very interesting and engaging. And the graphic novel with the NFT lets you right away get into sort of an expansive, explorable world. And I've always loved the graphic novel because I think that's a medium by which still a lot of our greatest entertainment comes from. Now, look at Netflix, got The Sandman. Look at AMC, had Preacher. Look at Amazon has The Boys. And I believe that
The Boys is good.
In collaboration with what we're doing together, can create this new character. But now people, instead of like just waiting for the next issue, there's going to be 5 issues in the story cycle. They can actually go into the issue and it'll continue to evolve. More frames will become animated. There'll be chances to co-create with us.
That's what's exciting.
It's also we're not trying. This is not a cash grab. It's in line with what you would spend if you're going to the store to buy a comic book, and you get a physical version of it to collect too. So we're really trying. It's
tangible.
Yeah, we're trying to create value.
And it's digital, right? I mean, I know it's a buzzword out there, but it's all encompassing. It's a new medium. I mean, listen, there's so much negative press out there with, people selling these freaking NFTs, these monkeys, these ape, these punks for lots of money while it's getting hacked and everything. So you do have to combat a lot of that negative PR out there. What are you guys doing to spread the word, and how can we help, get everyone on board?
Well, I mean, once again, I think you're just you have to spread the word of what it is that you're doing, and also encourage people to step into, not the future, but step into the now, right? Like, I think there's graphic novels that are sold every day, but I'm like, how many are they really selling? And I think a lot of times it's like, okay, there's a new, Ozzy Osbourne graphic novel, or
who's really reading it? Like, how many people want to see?
I mean, Ozzy? Right? It's cool to have it say, "Look at me, I've got a graphic novel," and that's great, but once again, I didn't want to do that. What I think, Adam, is that another thing that people don't know yet is an NFT is almost like a moving, living entity, right? So when you look at a graphic novel and you see this picture on the page, I'm using air quotes. It's not just a picture of, Jericho, Adam, and Dave sitting there with bubbles next to our mouths.
Yeah, no one wants to watch that.
Dialogue.
No one's paying for that.
If I'm taking out a gun and shooting you, it's not just a picture of blam. It's me taking a gun out, and you see the bullet leave the chamber, right? Like there's, then there's stuff going on and lighting,
it's an experience.
And smoke, and it's an experience, right? Yeah, it's almost like a living, breathing. It's almost like an animated comic book. And once people start getting used to that, kids or whoever that's reading it is going to go back and look at an old school comic book, and it's going to be like us looking at an 8-track tape or something, going like, "What do you do with this thing? Why isn't it? How do I even listen to this?" So once you can wrap your head around what an NFT is, then you understand the benefits of it. And the one thing I'll say is people go, "Why don't I just take a picture of it and then I have it?" It's like, okay, so let's go to the Louvre to look at the Mona Lisa, and we look at this Mona Lisa and we appreciate the brilliance of the Mona Lisa, and it's worth, I don't know, whatever it's worth, $500 million or whatever the hell it is. Okay, I'm going to take a picture with my cell phone. I'm going to print it out. I'm going to stick it on the wall, and now I've got the Mona Lisa. Duh. Well, it doesn't work that way, right? And that's kind of what the same analogy is with an NFT.
So I'm also going to continue my campaign to call NFTs programmable art. And we're trying to explore that quality of the NFT. In other words, they tell you if you're going to art school or you want to be a creator, focus on the story. This is a great story that has been developed by Chris. And I think it's by itself valuable to read it. So it's not an NFT to hold the NFT. The NFT makes you a participant in the story. And over time, more frames become animated. But then the community reading this will have the chance through the programmable art to communicate. Maybe they want to see this turned into their own and see the story continue. And that's what I love about the potential of this art form. How many times have you loved a show and then the distributor's just taking it off the air? Here's a way for the audience. It's like a Kickstarter, the next level kind of view. It's
creative legacy. It's creative legacy for Chris. It's creative legacy for the
creative interaction. Instead of just like getting a signed poster and you help make an independent film, you're actually entering this world. And if you want to choose to build it out with us, we can do that. And I think that's where the project differs greatly than either being tried too grand and make this like complete explorable metaverse or like a cash grab or like a picture of NFT. No, the NFT, the programmable art, provides access to this storytelling.
And this is exciting, and we're going to link it up at the end. We're going to have something pretty cool for my audience, which we'll get to in a little bit here. So let's bring it home here, Chris. And I want to circle back to probably, I would assume your greatest profession is being a dad. How have you balanced it over the years, man? I mean, you're on the road all the time. How have you maintained being an awesome dad?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, like, we're talking about all these different things that I'm doing, but a lot of it most of it is time management. And anybody that's in show business will tell you, like, in wrestling, the show starts at 8, you got to be there at 2. The gig starts at 9, you get there at noon. So what do you do all day? Well, you could sit around and do nothing, or you could do podcasts and you could write books and you can, have meetings about NFTs and all that sort of thing. So you can, you just use that time wisely, and then sometimes, like this past 6 weeks has been pretty nuts because I went to the UK with Fozzy. Then I came home for a week. I had some wrestling I had to do. Then I went to Australia with Fozzy. Then I went to Canada to film a movie. Then I had to go to the States to wrestle, then back to Canada, then back to the States. But now I'm home, and I'm home for 3 weeks, right? So now I can, do all the things at home that I have to do. And as your kids get older, it's a shame, but they grow up and they don't really want to hang out with their parents. They go and do stuff. And then suddenly one kid's off to college, the other 2 kids are driving and they're at their friend's house. And it's like, well, what am I going to do anyways? My wife's got goats in the field that she hangs out with. So I'm sitting here talking to you guys, right? So it's like, I think
we
it's
appreciate
time,
that.
time management and kind of just having passion for what you do. It's the old saying, which is so true. If you love what you do, you never really work a day in your life. And that's what it is for me. And not being complacent. That's why, entering this new world, like for example, with the NFT, it's like, it's never been done before for me. So like, let me really look into this and see what I can do. And everything else is still important for me. And if I don't want to do it, I don't. So there's no kind of ancillary projects where, Chris, you got to do this. Oh shit. Like, no, like I want to do all these things. So then you do them. And that's basically the best explanation I can give.
Chris, you've had an incredible life, incredible career, and it's not stopping anytime soon. So let's bring it home here. But the podcast is ending soon, and I want to bring it home. Chris, what's the single greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every day? A mantra, something you repeat in your head, a little birdie on your shoulder.
Paul Stanley said it in a movie when I was a teenager. I know Paul Stanley. He's a friend of mine. I've said the quote so many times that people think it's my quote, and every time it gets published as a Chris Jericho quote, Paul Stanley will text me and go, "Where's my royalty?" And it's the only people that tell you can't do something are the ones that have failed. The people that have failed at their own dreams will tell you can't do something. I, Chris Jericho, will never tell someone they can't do something because I did it. And if I can do it, you can do it. That's it. I wrote a book. It's called No is a 4-letter word, a self-help book almost. And that's the whole concept. It's so easy to throw the word no around. I don't ever accept no. And everybody on my team that works with me, don't tell me why it's not going to work. If there's 99 ways it's not going to work, tell me the one way it will work, and let's work on that. And if you can kind of have that attitude, you'll always succeed. No, don't take no for an answer.
That's incredible advice. And Chris, last but not least, you look back on your life and your career and you look at those hard times, those tough times when you had to dig down deep and harness that inner tenacity to drive you forward. And today you sit here with gratitude for your life, your career, the ability to create and really do whatever the hell you want. How does Chris Jericho stay focused? What is your beacon? Chris Jericho, what is your North Star in life?
Man, that's pretty deep. Like I never really get that philosophical, right? Like to me, it's just a cool challenge for the day. Like, what can I do? Like I have a lot of responsibility to the people that enjoy my work. I don't really call them fans of the friends of Jericho. So what cool shit can I think of to do that people that enjoy my work will get a kick out of? What can I do to make other people, when they get off work on a Friday afternoon, listen to, watch, think about, that's gonna make their day a little better, So I think that's basically it. I have responsibility to the people that enjoy what I do and to keep doing stuff that they can dig. That's pretty low level, but that's kind of what it is for me at this point.
That's a good stuff, man. Chris, I want to thank you so much for your time. Dave Shapiro, thank you so much for pulling it all together. I want everyone to check out the Painmaker NFT on OpenSea. Dave, where else could folks find the project and learn more?
Semkhor.io/Painmaker.
Awesome. And we're going to link it up there as well, too. And you can find Chris all over social media. Chris Jericho, I want to thank you so much for your generous time. I appreciate you. It's been an honor. Everyone listening at home, you know where to find out more at thepozcast.com. Remember, take care of each other, look out for one another, and catch us next week for another great episode of The Pozcast. Take care, everybody.